You have to reset yourself.
What? You can come and hang out with us and then.
Well, now that you think you're gonna win, though, that's
Yo.
dude, what?
No, if you're not gonna win, is it really?
Oh, we're gonna miss you there. But, yeah. And you're welcome to still come and hang out with us before if you want. Just like your mom.
Wait, what is the
Yeah. What?
What is the performance?
This is back to you.
Like, we should all pull up to and watch them play.
Oh, I see what I did.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
Why?
I see what
Why?
She needs experience.
Because that's our. I mean, I would be fine if we didn't have retreat that day, but we don't. So.
Last year, activity on the retreat.
Well, it'll probably be at nighttime, right? You don't know. Okay, how about you tell your mom to talk to you, and then I'll talk with her and discuss what we can do, okay? But yeah, we're going to talk about our families. And what does the Bible say about how we relate to our families? Because I feel like that's a pretty important topic for all of us, regardless of whether you are currently going through difficulties with them or you've gone through difficulties with them in your past. I also have difficulties with my parents and my family, so I think it's important for us to know what does the Bible say about it, what does Jesus say about it, and how are we supposed to interact with them, what kind of role do they play in our lives, right? So we'll talk about that at the retreat. Yeah? We good? Sound important? Sound interesting? Sounds useful? Yes? No?
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
We started.
Thank you. Alright, everybody. Today, part 14. Part 14. We are creeping towards the end. There's only a few left. Part 14, Lex Talionis. Leviticus chapter 24. We're going to look at one of the most famous laws in all of Scripture. It's called Lex Talionis or Talion law. Talion law. Okay? Everyone say Talion law.
It's how you know.
So Talion law is a legislative principle that's in the passage today, but also exists in other ancient laws as well. It shows up everywhere in the ancient world, from Babylon all the way to Rome. But what is Talion law? This is Talion law. Talion law is the principle of eye for an eye, also called retributive justice, right? The idea that a crime must be paid for by the measure of damage that it caused. Right? We good? Yes? Talion law? Everyone understand? Right? Why is this law important? How does it intersect with the Levitical law, and why should modern Christians care about this law? Those are the questions that I'm trying to answer today for us. Okay? Yeah? Everyone on the same page? Cool. We're going to read our passage together before we begin. Everyone turn to Leviticus 24, verses 17 to 21. Okay? Oh no, I need to use my phone. I'm sorry on the recording. We probably didn't pick up the first part, but that's okay. Talk about Italian law today. Okay. So here's what it says: Leviticus 24, 17 to 21. Anyone who kills a human being shall be put to death. Anyone who kills an animal shall make restitution for it, life for life. Anyone who maims another shall suffer the same injury in return. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The injury inflicted is the injury to be suffered. One who kills an animal shall make restitution for it, while one who kills a human being shall be put to death. Okay, so this passage is weird. Okay? It's weird in the entire context of Scripture. But it's not weird because of the law itself, right? What's actually strange is where it shows up. Because chapter 24, if you guys notice, we're verse 17, right? What's happening on the first 16 verses before this? Well, chapter 24 actually starts with routine temple details. Things like how to take care of the lamp in the temple, and how to take care of the bread of the presence. There was usually a loaf of bread in the tabernacle or in the temple, right? And in fact, that bread is part of the presence that Jesus mentions in our passage from a few weeks ago when we were talking about the Sabbath. But suddenly in verse 10, right, this kind of temple stuff turns into this story about a blasphemer, somebody who's a blasphemer, right? This guy who's half Israelite, half Gentile. It's it's a weird story, and the chapter even tells us the name of his mom, right, to show us, like, just as a grounded historical example and stuff. But the weirdest thing is that this person who blasphemes the name of God is, at the end of the story, sentenced to death. Right? Sentenced to death. That is really weird. And if you've grown up in church, you kind of go like, oh yeah, that sounds obvious. But like, let's just think about it for a second. Like, is that an eye for an eye? Like, if you just curse God's name one time, like, is that the same as murdering someone else? How could that be the same as murdering someone else? And I think Rabbi Jacob Milgram asked an interesting question. What if the story is placed right before the Italian law on purpose? What if killing a person is equivalent to cursing God? Right? Because, yeah, maybe you can look at it as cursing God's name puts the entire community at risk, so it kind of is an eye for an eye. And then Rabbi Milgram actually takes it further. Look at this question here. Is there something about the image of God in every human being that must never be marred, damaged, or destroyed, no matter the consequences? I think that's the foundation of this entire law in Leviticus. And I think it's interesting because this is generally the opposite of how people invoke Italian law, right? You watch this. So you were like fast forwarding a video. Anyway, because most people, when they look at Italian law, this eye for an eye principle, they look at it as like really simple, almost like barbarically simple, right? An immature quality is attached to it. Like a child going like, well, he kicked me, so I kicked him back, right? And it feels like really satisfying because we have this thirst for vengeance in all of us that's kind of gruesome and immediate, right? Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, getting even, balancing the scales, giving him what he deserves, right? According to what he did to me. And above all else, like, I think we all have this intrinsic understanding that this is fair. Eye for an eye, it feels fair, right? It feels just, it feels logical. But that's the thing, I don't think Italian law was primarily about making revenge fair, and I think it's the opposite of what it was actually used for. Because we have to understand it in its context. Because fairness is not something new or revolutionary, right? It's not like back then they were just like, oh, like our understanding of fairness is different. No, every single 2-year-old knows what fairness is, right? In fact, fairness is something that is one of the first human instincts to develop. You can see it in kids, right? They know what's fair and what's not. And Italian law being fair is standard. So then what makes it revolutionary? What makes it different? What makes it new? Well, Italian law was also egalitarian, and that is where it gets special, right? Because Italian law means that no one is special. No one gets special treatment, or that's how it's supposed to be. No one is above the Italian law. That means even if you're a king or a lord, regardless of your social status, right? It doesn't matter, you still get punished the same. You hurt a peasant, you hurt someone poor, you hurt somebody on the lower rings of society, according to Italian law, you are still supposed to give that person justice. That's the ideal, that's the reason why it was revolutionary. So back then and even today, right, people are using ways to get around Italian law, right? They use their power, they use their money, but that was the ideal, right? All human beings were equal. And no one should be above the law. That was the plan. Right? And Italian law was revolutionary because it acknowledged the humanity of all people, regardless of race, background, or social status. Even people weaker than you, even people you disagreed with, people you didn't like, people who did not have as much money as you, people who were of a lower social class than you. So even people who were completely different from you, like foreigners and immigrants, like these all deserved respect and honor and dignity. Right? So the deeper point was that because Italian law protects the dignity of all the image bearers of God, which means all humans, then blasphemy or cursing God's name is equal to murder because they both attack the image of God. Right? Murder attacks the image of God in another person, and blasphemy attacks the image of God to himself. Right? And I think Jesus really captures the image and the heart of Italian law best in Matthew chapter 5. We went over this during our Sermon on the Mount series. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, give your coat as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. Give to the one who asks of you, do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. Right? So Jesus takes this egalitarian nature of Italian law and he pushes it further. Right? Italian law to Jesus says that every human being deserves justice. Jesus says a true follower of God pursues justice, even without damaging or destroying the image of God in the other person. And that's why, again, we see that the blasphemy law does make sense. Cursing God's name is the same as murdering a person because it attacks the image of God directly. And Italian law teaches us that you must not destroy or damage the image of God ever. Therefore, the purest expression of Italian law is when we follow Jesus' interpretation and we refuse to damage another image bearer, no matter what the reason is. So why is this important for Christians today, and why should we care? How does this apply? Let's talk about it. Okay? I only have one application for today, and it is that Christians must recognize and honor the image of God in every single human being. Christians must honor and recognize the image of God in every single human being. And I want to get a little bit personal today. I'm going to share some of my own beliefs and values, and I want to show you guys how I practice this principle in my own life, because I think that's the best way to illustrate this concept. And my list is not a complete list, so please don't think of it that way. And I also want to be honest, I don't follow these principles perfectly. Okay? I'm not great at following them either, right? But this, again, is something that I try to live toward. These are my ideals. These are my understandings of what I'm supposed to be doing in my own life. And this is genuinely how I try to honor the image of God in other people. So here's my list. Okay? I practice honoring the image of God in all human beings by being anti-war of any kind. Right? So I hate war. I don't think there's anything such as just war or proactive war. I think that's all BS made up to justify killing innocent people. Right? I do not support the death penalty. I don't think that any human being should be given the ability to again, image or damage the image of God in another person. Right? I do not support any kind of retaliatory violence or vengeance. I don't think that you should use violence to get back at another person, even if they were violent toward you. I believe that all people, especially my enemies and the people who hate me, deserve respect and kindness and decency. Right? I don't withhold kindness and decency because of who you are or because of how you acted toward me. Everyone deserves that respect from me, regardless of how they behave toward me. I do my best to pray for the good of all people, and as much as possible, I avoid tearing down others or disparaging others. That means things like racism or things like hateful speech. I try really hard not to use that kind of language, and I try really hard not to tear down or damage the reputation or image of God in other people around me with my words. I try really hard not to rage on the road. Right? I curb my road rage and during competitive games. Right? That means like, something as dumb as the Activate Tuscan thing that we went to, right? I was not getting angry or raging at people, and as or even Super Smash or whatever else, right? I really try hard not to rage during those, and I do my best to control myself and to regulate my emotions. And anytime that I do fail, I try to be quick to apologize, and I give the most benefit of the doubt possible to everyone. Okay? And this is just my short list, right? This is not everything. This is just what I can come up with as I was planning for the sermon. And your list is going to look different from mine, right? But what matters is, do you have a list? Do you have a list of principles for yourself? Of what you try to be toward other people? How you try to behave toward other people? But we've got to remember that Scripture doesn't give us like one single list for everyone to follow, right? It's inviting us. It invites us to seriously take this principle and wrestle with it and apply it to your personal life. If I just handed you my list and just said you should do all of this, right, and you haven't ever wrestled with it yourself, this is not going to stick. It's not going to produce real change in your life. Real change only comes from inside you. You're the only one that can change your life. That's it. No one else. Okay. So even when it's hard or boring, regular reflection on how you're living the way of Jesus is one of the most important things that we can do. And that's why today, a little bit shorter. We're going to end here, but I'm going to actually have two questions to discuss before we close in prayer. Here they are. For now, we'll cut the recording